pause. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Judi Simmons Estes, and I will be your guide for exploring Unity Foundations. And so we'll be meeting from 10 o'clock to 11:30, and today is September 16th. It's so wonderful to see everybody. Happy to have you with us for this second class on Unity. And I'm going to go ahead and get started with an opening prayer. So if you'll just join me in settling into the space that you're in and begin to switch your attention from your morning activities to this now moment. And I just invite you to focus on the breath as you also focus on your heart area, your chest area, inhaling and exhaling more slowly and deeply than normal, yet at a pace that's comfortable for you. And one of the beautiful things about focusing on the breath is it brings us to the now moment, letting go of the past, letting go of the future. So we open this sacred place, acknowledging the power of divine love, which draws us together today. Each of us is a unique, unrepeatable expression of God. Together as one, we are a powerful combination of souls. We acknowledge and appreciate the choice each person has made to be here with us this morning. This is a gathering of friendship and support. And we say, thank you, thank you, thank you, God. And so it is. Amen. So I'd like to begin just by sharing my screen and reviewing the topics for today. I put it in the email I sent out, but I think it's always nice to know when I'm taking a class what we'll be talking about. So we're going to start out just talking about Merle and Charles and their emphasis on prayer, and especially prayer for healing as a Unity foundation. We're going to move on to talking about the study of metaphysics and the metaphysical Bible interpretation. What is that? Prosperity principles from a Unity perspective, the 12 powers that Charles Fillmore, our co-creator, identified. We offer you a reading list, and then I will show you where the handouts are at for this class. Actually, this whole series of 3 classes, and I've got the link here. And I'm happy to send this PowerPoint out to all of you. If you're so interested, we can decide that at the end. Any questions about what we'll be talking about today? All righty, well, let's just jump right in then. I love to talk about the beginnings of Unity because I just think it's so interesting that in the late 1800s, there was already such a thing as a New Thought movement. There were already individuals that, when they looked at organized religion, regardless of the denomination, that it just didn't make as much sense to them as some of their own ideas. And Myrtle Fillmore was one of these individuals. In 1889, she was diagnosed with tuberculosis, and the doctor said she had 6 months to live. And she just could not accept that. That just made absolutely no sense to her that she was going to die in 6 months. So she decided that the universe was working with her and that she was going to go about healing herself. So for 2 years, she sat in meditation and prayer several hours a day. And she continued to say positive affirmations. She looked at her health as a reflection of her consciousness. She saw wholeness as her natural state. She saw her life as a force that was vibrant. And she kept repeating these ideas and similar ideas for 2 solid years. And at the end of those 2 years, she was free from tuberculosis. And she, in fact, lived until she was 86 years of age. So Myrtle's contribution to what we now call unity is this idea of healing prayer. This week, we just had Unity's day of prayer from Wednesday night at 7 to Thursday night at 7. And one of the things that they emphasized, the speakers emphasized, was that unity began as a movement of healing prayer. And we heard from the woman that is in charge of Silent Unity, and she said that 99% of the prayer requests they get are for healing, financial healing, healing of mind, body, spirit. Every request ends up going back to a need for healing. So unity is spiritually articulated as a mind idea expression that addresses the needs of the head, the heart, and the body. So you'll hear many of us in unity talk about dropping to your heart space to connect with yourself. I'm also a heart math trainer, and so I use that a lot because coherence is an alignment of mind, body, and spirits. And in the end, that whole idea of mind idea expression is based on rich traditions of Western philosophy and the teachings of Jesus and our understanding of the mind-body connection. Now, what did Charles offer up? He's the co-founder. What did he offer up? Charles Fillmore talked about 3 phases of mind: the subconscious, the superconscious, and the conscious. He talked about how problems come from what's buried in the subconscious. And he emphasized over and over that he did not see prayer as a magic. It's, I know when I first came to Unity, I came out of a religious background where I almost saw spirit and God, my concept of God at that time, as a vending machine or as a Santa Claus, that if I would pray in a correct way, if I'd be a good little girl, then my life would be free from any kind of problems. And as I grew into adulthood, that certainly wasn't my experience. And I realized that the concept that made much more sense to me as an adult were the principles that I found in Unity. So Charles really emphasized that there's more to us than what's on the outside, that outside appearances and the life we had outside of our body, that that's not all of who we are, that we have a subconscious, and that subconscious we spend a lifetime healing. And then we have the conscious mind, which is how we're thinking on an ongoing day-to-day basis. And then we have the superconscious, and the superconscious is our connection with whatever we want to call it. And that beautiful thing about Unity is you can call spirit, higher power, God, Father, Mother, God, whatever you choose to call the universe, the universal energy, universal strength. That's okay. But that is what Charles refers to as the superconscious. And his bottom line, he said, is, do I know my true identity? Do I know my true identity? And I think many of us can really identify with that whole question of who am I and what's my true identity? That question is what brings many people to Unity. So Unity was born out of prayer and meditation, beginning with Myrtle, ended up developing a 5-step prayer model, which I'm going to share with you. And then our sister New Thought group is called the Centers for Spiritual Living. They also have a 5-step prayer process of affirmative prayer. And affirmative prayer was actually modeled by Jesus, because Jesus was praying from the source, not to a God out here, but from the God within. And through the evolution of personal prayer practices of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, they very much emphasize that there's no right way or wrong way to pray. The last, I'm going to talk about this particular piece, and then I'll come back to you and we'll see what you have to say about all this. But in Myrtle's healing letters, she made the following 3 points. Who would like to read the first point? It begins with, "It's not enough to pray."
I will.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sharon.
It is not enough to pray. Prayer is one step that you take, but you need other steps. You need to think of God, the all-powerful healer, as being already within you in every part of your mind, heart, and body.
Okay, I just invite you to breathe that in and read it to yourself again. Because this is something new for a lot of us that came out of another or a religious tradition. In every part of your heart, mind, and body. And who'd like to read the next point?
I can read it.
Okay, thank you.
To keep one's attention and prayers in the spiritual realm of mind without letting them to work out into the soul's expression and into the actual physical doing of that which corresponds with what the mind and heart has thought and spoken and prayed, is to court trouble.
Wow, that was a mouthful.
I know. I had to pause.
that might win the prize for one of the longest sentences we're going to read today. I mean, that is a lot. To keep one's attention and prayers in the spiritual realm of mind without letting them work out in the soul's expression and into the actual physical doing of that which corresponds with what the mind and the heart has thought and spoken and prayed, is to court trouble. That sentence is a huge foundational thought to why Unity focuses on affirmative prayer. We don't look at the appearance. We look at the truth of our being, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and that what's outside of us is a reflection of what's going on subconsciously within us. I kind of think of an iceberg, that what you see on top is not what you see if you go into the water and look underneath. And I'd like a volunteer for the last point. That begins with, to keep declaring love and power.
I can read.
Thank you.
To keep declaring love and power and life and substance, and yet unconsciously, perhaps assuming limitations and living them, will cause explosions and congestion that work out in the physical. We need to harmonize our thinking and our prayers with actual living experiences.
We need to harmonize our thinking and our prayers with actual living experiences. So I don't know about all of you, but when something happens in my life that really revs up a lot of emotion, those are the times when it's more difficult for me to use affirmative prayer. I say the words, but then I still worry. And what I have come to know is that that's just my human being a human being. And I get myself out of that place a lot faster today than I used to, but I still do it sometimes. How about the rest of you? What do you think about these basics that we've gone over about Myrtle and Charles, and what their thinking was as they began to talk about what was going on for them? Because I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but they never intended their thoughts and their writings and the small groups that they ran and the radio shows they had and the television Daily Word that they used to have and the magazines they had and the Daily Word and Silent Unity. They never intended that to evolve into a church. Their idea was more, I would say, oriented toward what, I don't know if you remember Norman Vincent Peale in the positive thinking, but they were just talking about what made sense to them. So I think what I'm going to do, there's 2, 4, 6 of you, and Alejandro, I'm going to break us into small groups for a minute. I don't know if you're in a place where you can participate or not.
I will try. It's a lot of noise here, but I will try.
You can try. Okay. I'm
Yes.
going to break you into small groups and I'm going to give you 3 minutes each. So get out your phone so you can time yourself. 3 minutes each to talk about how it is for you to hear about these beginnings of unity, of the beginning with healing prayer, beginning with a belief that God is within us and we have control over our lives and over what happens in our lives. And when we see an outside manifestation of something that doesn't agree with us, that we have the power to shift our thinking. And by shifting our thinking, those outside appearances are going to shift. Any questions about what I want you to talk about? All right, let's do small groups. And you can just see how it unfolds for you. So we're going to have 3 groups of 2. And I'm assigning you automatically. So Courtney, you and Sharon will be together. Donna, you and Kim will be together. Oh, there's 5 of you. And then Alejandro, I guess you're going to be with me.
Okay, I'll do it.
I was seeing 6 people and not counting myself. All right. I don't know how many times y'all have been in breakout groups, but it'll come up and say there's 60 seconds left before you come back into the whole group. Keep talking because you can talk a lot. And what I'd like for you to do is each have an ability to share without the other person interrupting. So Alejandro, I'm going to have you go first, and I'm just going to listen to what you have to say. I'm not going to interrupt you. And when your 2 to 3 minutes are up or when you're finished, then I'll go ahead and share. Okay?
Okay, perfect.
Okay. I'm opening all rooms. anything that anybody wants to share that was new to them? I'll start, and then if anybody has anything else. In my talking with Alejandro, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, he just brought to my attention some things I hadn't really thought about it in depth, and essentially how revolutionary it was for the Fillmores to have the ideas about God that they had, to have to use the available social media at the time, because they had Daily Word on TV, they had Daily Word on the radio, they were doing small group meetings, they had the cafeteria on campus that sold vegetarian meals, and people would go to their own churches and then come to the village for lunch. In 1889, of course, that was just the beginning, so I guess I shouldn't use that as the starting point, but in the early 1900s, as they were buying property and so forth, they were kind of going against the grain of everything that everybody else was doing, and I had never thought about it in that way. Did any of you have any particular ahas? Yes, Courtney.
So yeah, and communicating, I was connecting that I just ended a 6-week shadow work course that I took with Alara. I'm not sure if everybody knows shadow work, but I feel like it coincides with what Charles says is the problems that are coming from what's buried in our subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
So those shadow parts of ourselves that they're like our triggering points. So this is like my current reality that I'm working through, but it also causes like a lot of kind of chaos and monkey mind chatter, at the same time. So that's where I'm at with that process. But
Okay.
yes, I feel very related to their beliefs. Yes. And experiencing that right now.
Yeah. Well, and Courtney, to kind of play on what you're saying, there's a concept in Unity called chemicalization. And chemicalization occurs when you're in a process of changing a particular thought pattern, or you've had a new awareness that you're trying to wrap your head around. Everything unlike that will show up. It's almost like, are you sure you really want to make that change in your thought pattern? And so that's what I call the monkey mind. No, don't think that way. Don't think that way. And it really helps me to look at the monkey mind is the human part of ourselves. And that yearning you're having to do things different so life will show up different for you. That's the spiritual being that you are. And what the Fillmores would say is the spiritual being of who you are is the truth. All of the monkey mind stuff is the humanness. And in the World Day of Prayer, when they were talking on Wednesday, they were talking about how some people believe that the whole purpose of us coming into this being in a body experience is to grow more quickly and more deeply than we would have the opportunity to do if we were out of body. But it's always a balancing act. It's a balancing act of society and everything, and how we're brought up. The most of us, how we're brought up, is all about the humanness. But as we move into our adulthood, we start thinking, hey, there's something more than that. And that's our spiritual being. Does that make sense, Courtney?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
And I love that. Thank you so much for
you're welcome.
Connecting those
You're
pieces.
welcome.
Yes. Thank you.
How about one more person? Anybody else want to share about we'll have other small group breakouts. Anybody want to share anything that was pretty powerful to them? If not, we'll move on. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. So, I know what I wanted to do now. Let me share screen and see if I can do it. I thought this would be kind of fun if it works. Let me see. I want to close that out. I want to minimize that. All right. I want you to put your thumbs up if you can hear and see what I'm about to play on YouTube, and put your thumb down if you can't, because I can't tell what you're experiencing. But I want to show you 45 seconds of Myrtle Fillmore praying her prayer of faith. And this is from YouTube. Okay, now I had it all keyed up, but oh, there we go. I found it. Okay, I do need to do that though. Okay, here it is. So thumbs up if you can hear it and see it. All right. There's supposed to be these little things I push at the bottom and I'm not seeing them. So I'm just going to give this a go and see if it works. If it doesn't, I'll give you the link and you can do it for yourself. Well, it's not starting for some reason. I can't figure out. All right, well then I'll just stop sharing that. And I'll try it again later. And I'll send you the link. But it's kind of cool listening to her talk. So I'm going to minimize Myrtle. And I'm going to go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint. Nope, not that one. Okay, now I've lost my PowerPoint, so I'm going to stop sharing this. All right, I don't know how I lost my PowerPoint, so I got to find it again. I love Zoom, especially when what I do works. When I don't do them, I've learned not to panic. Okay, view. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the 5-step prayer process that emerged out of Myrtle and Charles's early work. And affirmative prayer, as these are going to be Judy's words, which might not be as succinct as what you might read someplace, but to me, what affirmative prayer is all about is well, in chaplaincy, we call it holding the high watch. Rather than looking at outside appearances, we go to what we know is truth. And this is particularly challenging when you're talking about a healing experience, because people can get into their story about what their healing experience is and want to focus on that. And that is exactly what in Unity we don't want to do. So if we look at the 5, yeah, there we go. Can you see that PowerPoint now? If we look at the 5 steps, in Unity's affirmative prayer, it's relax. So as we began the opening prayer, I invited you to go to your chest and heart area to focus on the breath, the inhale and the exhale. That would be relaxation. And then concentration would be when I said something to the effect of we valued the fact that all of you chose to show up today, and we appreciated that. And then there was a short point of meditation, which was just a few words around what we would create together as a group, and then the realization of our being together and impacting one another, and then the gratitude for having the opportunity. So those are the steps in Unity's affirmative prayer. Center for Spiritual Living shifts it a little bit, and they begin with, which is not that different than Unity, it's just a little different words, starting out that God is, So recognizing our higher power, whatever we choose to call our higher power. Unification, I am, so I am one with God. God is within me. What the truth is, and then releasing whatever is we're concerned about. And oftentimes in unity, we'll use the phrase, this or something better now manifests for my good and the good of all concerned. And then always ending in thanksgiving. Always ending in thanksgiving. And the reason I wanted to play Myrtle's prayer is because you can hear, once you know those steps, you can hear them, or if you hear them first, and then I tell you what the steps are, and then we play it again, then you go, oh, I see those pieces now. So one of the things that that in unity we believe is that if, for example, I have a friend right now that, let me stop sharing while I talk about this, that was recently diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And being able not to look at that diagnosis, but look at the truth as Myrtle saw it, and saying affirmations such as, health is a reflection of my consciousness, my wholeness is my natural state, I activate the power of my faith, my life force is vibrant, I release and let go, seeing the vision of good and the good of all concerned. That is aligning mind, body, and spirit, and knowing that no matter what happens, there is healing happening in mind, body, or spirit. So it's looking at death in a different way than we might have before. That if someone has an illness and they're saying affirmative prayer, and everyone around them is saying affirmative prayer, and they are enmeshed in the belief that this or something better is now going to manifest for my good or the good of all concerned, and then they die, that doesn't mean that that prayer wasn't heard. You know, we all have our own life curriculum, and we all have our own life trajectory. And I think my major experience with that is in 1986, my 16-year-old son, my only child, was in an automobile accident. And I ended up being told that he was brain dead, and made the decision to let him go. And for 2 years, I was in, it's hard to find words to describe, but I'm guessing some of you have had the experience, maybe not with the death, but had the experience of just, I felt like an earthquake had happened inside of me. And when the earthquake was over, everything settled in a different place, so I didn't even know who I was, kind of a thing. And then I had a dream, and he was in my dream. And I was out at the cemetery where he was buried. And all of a sudden, in the dream I was, and all of a sudden he rose straight up, like his head came out of the ground first, and then his feet, and then he was hovering over the grave. And all he said to me is, Mom, God has not forsaken you. While this impacted you, it had nothing to do with you. This was my journey. And when I heard that, I had already started going to Unity at this point. It just really resonated with me, because I had always had this guilt that if I would have had a closer relationship with God, if I would have prayed more in the hospital chapel, if I would have this, if I would have that he would have lived. And not only did that move my grief to a different phase, but it really impacted my view of death in a profound way. And it's not scary to me anymore. So when my mom died, when my dad died, when I was with them, they were at home. I cared for an uncle for 5 years. When he died at home, I really felt like it was a spiritual awakening. That's not what I had learned in organized religion. So for me, that was a kind of freedom to it was part of my journey of looking at life differently. So any questions about affirmative prayer and the idea of not looking at what's on the surface? You can always do, all of you know about the app that you can get on your phone for UVC, and you can download an app, and inside that app is a prayer wall. You can read some of the prayers on the prayer wall and get a sense of affirmative prayer. So I'm just going to open up my app and go to the prayer wall, and I'll read you a couple. Okay, so here are some prayers from on Tuesdays. At noon we have an hour group called Soul Connection, and I can give you the information about it. But it's just right now it's all women. But there have been times in the past when it hasn't been all women, and we just talk about what's going on in our lives. And I facilitate that group. But for example, for Lynn, we know the garage sale process will unfold with comfort and ease. We see Sharon and Vince having safe travels to and from Ireland with an experience of renewed energy. We see Eileen being cared for with excellence in all aspects of daily living. We see your property attracting the perfect buyer in the spring. As that buyer is readying for a move, you will be readying your property. It will all unfold in divine order. We see your safe travels to and from Colorado and Destin, Florida with renewing experiences during all of your travels. Does that give you a little bit of flavor of how affirmative prayer is different than at least what I grew up with, which was beseeching prayer? I would pray when I needed something. I would get down on my knees, put my elbows on the bed, and then please God, give me this. Please God, give me that. Please God, don't let my parents get a divorce. Please God. And then when I didn't get what I wanted, I would think I was doing something wrong. Any of you have that experience of beseeching prayer? Okay, Dona's going, yeah, I've had that experience. So with unity, holding the belief that no matter what happens, and no matter if we understand it or not, it's for our highest good and the highest good of all concerned. And sometimes it takes years later before you go, oh, I've had different women in my life coaching practice go, oh, I got that divorce and he didn't want to be married to me anymore. And I just thought my life was over. And now 15 years later, I'm going, oh my God, I'm so glad that happened, because it's real clear to me now that that wasn't going anywhere. Or it could even be a job, people getting fired for a job and going, oh my God, they rejected me. And they go on and they find something that is much more fitting with them. And then they say, oh, it had, this was meant to be. I wouldn't have ever left because I was too uncomfortable doing that. But the fact that they gave me this gift of firing me, wow, it opened up a whole new world for me. Any thoughts? All righty, well, let's move on to sharing screen again. And so unity has 5 principles, and they call them the fundamental truths. Who would like to read those first 3 principles?
I can read it.
Okay, thank you.
God is absolute good, everywhere present. Human beings have a spark of divinity within them, the Christ spirit within. Their very essence is of God, and therefore they are inherently good. Human beings create their experiences by the activity of their thinking. Everything in the manifest realm has its beginning in thought.
Okay, just look those 3 over. See if any of those are like, nah, I don't believe that. Nah, that doesn't make sense to me. That's the other beauty about unity. You don't have to believe those 5 principles if you don't want to believe those 5 principles. They're just throwing them out there for you. And some people, when they first come to Unity, they don't like that third one, human beings create their own experiences by the activity of their thinking. It's like, well, that means I've got to be responsible for my own life. And how about this person? And how about that person that's making my life miserable? And how about this? And how about that that's making my life miserable? The idea of being responsible for your own life and embracing the idea that maybe if you start thinking differently, the world will show up differently is a big step for some people. So the fourth one, prayer is creative thinking that heightens the connection with God mind and therefore brings forth wisdom, healing, prosperity, and everything good. Knowing and understanding the laws of life, also called truth, are not enough. A person must also live the truth that he or she knows. Rev Erin, when she does speak, almost always emphasizes that in Unity, the expectation is if you want to walk this walk, then you need to not only talk the talk, but you need to take the steps to manifest in your life these principles. It's not enough to just go, oh yeah, this makes sense to me. And then your behaviors and the choices you make on a day-to-day basis are not consistent. So you'll hear her bring up the 5th principle a lot. All right, let's jump into the study of metaphysics. By placing the 5 Unity principles within the 3 categories of mind, idea, and expression, we can see that each of the Unity principles are really components of the foundation formula of Christian metaphysics. Now, this is this is an area that on one hand, when I first came to Unity, I embraced it. And on another hand, I kind of had to scratch my head, and because sometimes my brain would hurt trying to embrace all this. Who would like to read this one, The Study of Metaphysics? Go ahead, Courtney.
We have the key to life, and that key, oops, I'm sorry, hold on. We have the key to life, and that key is the knowledge that life is a state of consciousness. The explanation of all your problems, the explanation of your difficulties, and the explanation of your triumph in life boil down to this. Life is a state of consciousness. That is the beginning and the end. That is the final step in metaphysics. All the other steps but lead up to that.
Well, that's kind of interesting that you read that one after what you shared, because that really is consistent with what we talked about a while ago when we talked about Charles believing that there were 3 phases of consciousness. Thank you so much for reading that. And that was from Emmett Fox. Emmett Fox was a Unity minister in New York City, I believe, for a number of years. Okay, who'd like to read this one?
I will.
Thanks, Sharon.
In changing our own consciousness, we change our experience of the world and may change our circumstances. Jesus said to first seek the kingdom of God, and seeking the kingdom within leads ultimately to changing our consciousness. This is an ongoing process of building consciousness through learning about and applying our commonly held principles and truths.
Hey. So metaphysics extends, and this has been really helpful to me because I was a person that when I was growing up and sitting in church and listening to all this Bible stuff, I kept being bored and going, why should I care what happened 2,000 years ago? It doesn't absolutely have anything to do with me today. So this this idea of looking at the Bible and interpreting the stories of the Bible metaphysically was just, quite frankly, I still have some trouble wrapping my head around it. I kind of have to be guided through it and be with somebody that actually is really good at translating the stories of the Bible to the divine ideas and the things that happen in our lives today. So Unity believes that Bible study is about self-discovery, and that the truth in the Bible is actually an expression of divine ideas. So that as we're listening to biblical stories, from those we take away some what Charles and Myrtle called divine ideas, apply them to our own lives for us to have a self-discovery in our own personal and spiritual growth. And what the key is to first get those divine ideas of the story, and then identify with some of the characters and the struggles that they have gone through. So a metaphysician or a truth student is one who desires to receive these divine ideas from the mind of God. And that's going to impact how we read the Bible. And then as truth students, we can study the Bible metaphysically and establish that direct connection to God. And Unity actually has a metaphysical Bible. I really like my metaphysical Bible a lot. You used to be able to go to the Unity library on campus and check them out, and you can't do that anymore. And also that's not realistic because we've got people from Florida and Georgia and as well as Missouri, so it's not possible for you to do that. But I would really encourage you to use truthunity.net. It has a lot of resources free of charge, and you can really delve into to so much history in Unity. Like there's a book called Lessons in Truth. It was written by Emily Cady, and I sometimes teach that class. And we are able to go into truthunity.net and actually look at her original notes before she even wrote the book, her original notes and her original drawings. And it's just kind of cool. It kind of brings it to life. So why study divine ideas expressed in the Bible? Because divine ideas that are expressed in the Bible are also expressed in our own consciousness. And so interpreting the Bible enables us to interpret what's going on in our own minds. So you're not, from a Unity perspective, you're not reading the Bible because you believe in it, what it says literally. Because the Bible has been written and rewritten so many times by so many different people, and things like women being left out that were critical to the times that were talked about. Rather than getting hung up on that, just looking at the Bible through those divine ideas. I think this is the last slide on this. So remember, the New Thought teaches that all things we experience in life had their origin in thought. We recreate our experiences in the activity of our thinking. Therefore, each Bible story and characters, we want to look at their own development as spiritual beings. And this is, in closing words, what Charles Fillmore had to say. Apart from being a book of great historical and biographical interest, the Bible is, from Genesis to Revelation, an inner or spiritual meaning, a record of experience and development of the human soul. So, what do you think about that? Well, I'm going to see if we break into small groups, if you'll feel more comfortable talking about it with one other person. So I'm going to this time. Would you like to have the same person or a different person? Raise your hand if you want the same person. Okay, we'll go ahead and, so Alejandro, that means you're going to be with me again.
Okay.
Let's just have you talk for 2 minutes each. And remember to let the person get all of their thoughts out before then it's your turn. So person first goes, time yourself. When your time is up, let person next go. And then if you still have a minute or so, then you can actually talk in a conversation. Okay, so this, what I want you to just to share about is this whole idea of the Bible, and whether in every religion I've ever attended on a Sunday, things were interpreted literally. And then more often than not, they were used as a reason for that person's beliefs. Like, I don't believe in homosexuality because the Bible doesn't say anything about homosexuality, or I could even have this passage that says it's not a very good thing. That's kind of an example. Whereas unity is looking at divine ideas, not literal, but divine ideas. Okay, that's what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to open up all rooms. You're going to time each other for 2 minutes. hopefully you had a rousing conversation on this topic.
Sorry. By mistake, I touched the screen. It's a touch screen iPhone, and I touched it,
okay.
and you disappear. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. Well, Alejandro was just sharing with me, and I was telling him that what he shared was common for unity, people in unity, and that is, how do you talk if in fact you buy that we don't take the Bible literally, and we're not saying that just because you come to unity you have to believe that, but if you do believe that, how do you even talk with a person that does take it very literally? And I think we all find our own answer to that question, how we're gonna deal with that. Have any of you had that challenge in your own family or within your network of friends? Sharon, how have you dealt with it, Sharon, if I may ask?
I usually just don't say anything. I just I grew up in the Christian church, which was pretty literal, and I mean liberal, and they kind of said, you got to interpret it your way. It's there for you. That's kind of how I grew up. But I have one brother and one sister who's very literal. They're Baptist, and they're very literal. And my brother even preaches. He conducts classes at his church and stuff. And the Bible is the word. And he'll say things sometimes that I find controversial. But I don't say anything. I just, let him, because that's his belief. And, I just don't say anything, even though I don't agree with him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is an example of walking our talk, so to speak. And if we believe that we each have our own life curriculum, and if we believe that everybody's on their own spiritual journey and that it's individualized for them, then we can be okay when people don't agree with us and not have that be controversial. And I think especially in families, it's not that we're not representing who we are, because we're representing who we are just by the life we live. That's what kind of the ending thing Alejandro and I were talking about is, we don't have to say this is what I believe, because how we show up in life is how we believe. And it's okay if people don't believe what we believe. Anybody else want to share how you deal with this situation? Because I think it's something we all have to, unity isn't a church that evangelizes, so it's not like we have to go out and convert everybody to what we believe. It's not, far from it. That's just not how it is. On the other hand, it's not unusual for somebody to say, wow, I'll give you an example. Last summer, I spend May through October in Colorado. I'm blessed to have a home here. And last summer, I became ill, and my nurse neighbor talked me into going to the hospital, which I thought was so silly. But I went to the hospital to the emergency room, and an hour later, I was being by ambulance going to this little town I live in is very tiny. It's like 5,000 people. So I was going to the next biggest city, and 3 hours later I was in surgery. And they didn't know I had a bowel obstruction, and they didn't know exactly how things were going to turn out, because they didn't know once they got in there if there was something behind what they could see from the CAT scan, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, none of that matters that much. But all the way it was an hour trip from my little town of Pagosa Springs to Durango. And I called my youngest brother, who's my POA, and I just made I said, I need you to get a sheet of paper. I want to write down all my arrangements in case this doesn't turn out the way we want it to turn out. Here are all my arrangements. And I talked to him about that. And then I got to the hospital, and I just decided that I was going to practice all this stuff. So I blessed the surgeon. I blessed the whole situation. I was just very interested in all the people that came in to serve me in whatever they were prepping me for the surgery. And then after the surgery, I was in the hospital for 7 days. And I had the most serene 7-day experience. As silly as it sounds, it was almost like being on a retreat. A nurse came in the first day and said, "Oh my, we've got a couple of services here I think you might be interested in. We have a meditation channel. We can show you where that's at. We have a TLC nurse, a tender loving care nurse that can come in every day. She can massage your feet or your head. She can bring in a service dog. There's a menu of things that we can do for you." And that's what happened every day. Somebody was coming in to do something for me. They'd had this program for 20 years at this particular hospital. I was worried. I've got a 102-pound German Shepherd who actually is laying on the bed right here because she loves to be in the room when I'm doing these kind of sessions. And I thought, what in the world am I going to do with her? And my accountant volunteered his daughter to come walk her every day once I got home. A neighbor took care of her in the meantime. I mean, everything just unfolded. And I just kept saying, I don't understand why this is happening or how this is for my highest good. And it worked. I'm here to say it worked. And I just surrendered to the whole process because the reality was I had absolutely no control. And so I'm just sharing that story with you to say that we don't have to evangelize or talk about why it is we believe what we believe in unity. I think our life just demonstrates what we believe. That over time, now, this was not a quick turnaround for me because I told you that my son died right before I got into unity, and that was 36 years ago. So I haven't gotten to where I'm at today overnight. It's been a lot of growing up emotionally as well as spiritually, but it works. It works if you work it, as they say in AA. All righty, well, let's just jump into, we're kind of moving down the track here. The next thing I want to talk to you about, unity's concept of prosperity. This is another biggie where unity is kind of different than other. I think other churches and other in just life in general. So metaphysically, the meaning of prosperity, if you look it up in the Revealing Word, which is a little book that Unity publishes, prosperity is defined as the consciousness of God as the abundant, everywhere present resource, unfailing, ready for all who open themselves to it through faith. So Myrtle talked about faith as constantly holding thoughts that are in your highest good. And regardless of outside appearances, like my hospitalization, to somebody else that might have just been this horrible experience. But faith is knowing that even though outward appearances might suggest otherwise, that this or something better is now manifesting for my highest good. And the difference between spiritual prosperity and material prosperity is that spiritual prosperity is founded on understanding of the inexhaustible, omnipresent substance of spirit as the source of supply. And the material belief is that the possessions constitutes prosperity. I mean, I've heard stories of the Depression and when everything went bonkers, that there were people jumping out of buildings, killing themselves. They just didn't know how they were going to survive during the Depression. And that belief, that faith, that no matter what the outside appearance is in our lives, that can shift. And many times shifts in ways that we would have never considered ourselves. And that's the reason I love the "this or something better now manifest for my good and the good of all concerned," is So often as human beings, we limit ourselves. And when we let go and let God, something far better ends up turning up in our lives, something we couldn't have even imagined that we would attract. And that is prosperity. So I'm just going to have you read this slide to yourself. There is a minister named Paul Hasselbeck, and in Unity, he's kind of our metaphysics guru, so to speak. And he's written a couple of books, Metaphysics 1 and Metaphysics 2. And if you decide you want to really delve in more to some of the principles of unity, you can order those through the Unity bookstore. And I have found them to be very informative. So prosperity is the abundance of every good thing our hearts desire. Knowing and believing that that blessing originates in God, the source of all good. And it is manifested in our lives through our enlightened use of the divine ideas of good, which God inspires. And then I just invite you to read these 2 sentences or 2 bullet points. And one of the things I always think about when I think about prosperity is gratitude, because it's so easy for us to focus on what we don't have rather than what we do have. And to me, having an attitude of gratitude is a prosperity consciousness. And I'm sure you've heard that in Unity, that thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. So that's the other reason I think having an attitude of gratitude is so powerful. Okay, one of the last things we're going to talk about is 12 powers. Charles Fillmore came up with this idea of 12 powers. And Rev Brenda, who presented last week, teaches a class on 12 powers. And there's also a book on 12 powers, at least one. And again, 12 powers is something that if you go to truthunity.net, you can get lots of good information on 12 powers. But Charles Fillmore felt that inherent within humankind are 12 fundamental spiritual principles or divine ideas that reflect God's nature and comprise our own divine nature. So through affirming their presence and by calling them forth into expression, we can quicken and develop these as real powers within our own lives. So each of these 12 powers centers in a different part of the body. So if you believe in chakras, then this information that Charles is bringing to you will be pretty palpable. For example, the power of faith is represented by the disciple Peter, and it's in the center of your head or your pineal gland. Imagine the power of imagination is associated with Bartholomew or Nathaniel, and it's between the eyes. The power of will is associated with Matthew, and it's at the center of the front brain. The power of understanding is Thomas. So my understanding, and I certainly am not an expert on this topic, is that if you feel as though you need more faith in your life, then learning more about Peter and blessing the center of your head and your pineal gland can help you draw upon the faith that Peter represents. And as you continue to focus on faith, then you will begin to experience more faith. And then I'll just let you see the other ones. Here's the heart energy and where it's located in your body and the disciple that's associated with it. So if you want to have more zeal in your life, Simon the Canaanite is who you would learn more about. Then there's body energy. So when I had that bowel obstruction last summer, I focused on elimination or renunciation, which is Thaddeus in the lower part of my back. So the purpose of our time together today was just to introduce you to some of the fundamentals of unity. And there's some recommended resources. And if you go to this link, let's see, I think I already have it pulled up. Let me see if I do. So on our website, we have a whole page on membership. And at the very bottom of the page are all the resources. So there's what is unity, history of unity, the unity movement, the chronology of how things developed, that 5-step prayer model I told you about, and the mind treatment from Centers for Spiritual Living, interpreting the Bible through a metaphysical lens, the 12 powers, Unity's 5 basic principles, New Thought founder lineage, because there were many people in addition to Myrtle and Charles. The whole idea of New Thought existed before 1889. And then there's a recommended reading list. And this was put together by Rev Erin. And then some of the common authors that have books that are consistent with unity. So, and I'm trying to remember, if you go to unity.org, or unityvillagechapel.org/membership, you can get to this. All right. Any thoughts? Closing thoughts? Any questions from what we went over? Anything confusing? I didn't explain it well enough. This was a kind of an introduction to some of the main topics. And there's lots of different ways you can delve into them more. I think I'll go back to the website because there's all kinds of resources on there that I want to make sure you're aware of. Let's just go back. Here's the home page. And as you know, you can come to the chapel, you can watch us on Facebook, you can watch us on online. After, if you come on Zoom, then we do have deep dive. Donna, you're usually at deep dive. We are always having different classes that are short-term classes, 3 or 4 weeks. Sometimes we have workshops. So there's lots and lots of information on the homepage of the website. And then this is if you want a live stream. There's also archives, so you can download past lessons on past Sundays. This tells about just about us. What is Unity, the history of Unity, the staff, the board of directors, membership, services, Sunday services, in-person services, prayer services, or prayer support systems, services and ceremonies. There's spiritual support. If you have something you want to just work through with somebody, there's a number of us that are on this. Martha Creek, some of these names will be familiar to you. New to UVC. I think this might be where the membership was at. Nope. Maybe activities. So there's activities and classes. These are ongoing. And of course, right now we're doing the Adventures in Spirituality signups. Here's the one. This is a workshop that Carolyn Noble's doing on, and it's just a 4-hour workshop. And I think it's only in person, but we do have some workshops that are. Okay, and then the giving part. Let me pull up minimize that and pull this back up. So ways to support Unity Village Chapel. Should you decide to become a member, you can certainly support without being a member. I listed giving of time, treasure, and talents first because that's so important, because there have been times in my life where I wasn't able to really give financially, but I could give in terms of just volunteering to do different things. And I think it's just always important to emphasize to people that if you cannot be supportive financially, we get that, and that's totally okay with us, but probably you have some kind of a skill that could support us in some way. You can send a check. You can do the $5 to Thrive, which you sign up ahead of time, and then you're contributing $5. I don't remember if it's a week or a month. You can text to give. You can auto give through your bank account. And then why would you want to join UVC? It may sound a little corny, but Alejandro's also said this, I noticed a couple of times, is that it really is, whether you're in Kansas City or not, it's a way of knowing that you belong somewhere, that you're with like-minded people, and you're a member of a spiritual family. Being a part of something greater than yourselves, a support system to grow in your spiritual authenticity and engaging in the community. And you can do that in so many different ways. There's numerous small groups. If you go back and look at the website, contributing to a place where you get spiritual nourishment. You have voting rights. When we have our annual meeting, you can be a small group leader. You can serve on the board. You can be involved in as many ways as you want to be involved or not. So that's always nice to know. Any closing questions? I want to honor your time and end on time. Next week, you will be meeting with Sanja Mathis. She is a minister who serves in many different capacities at UVC. She actually lives in Alabama. I don't know if all of you are aware of it or not, but we've got members from across the country. So you don't have to be local to be a member or to serve in any capacity. So Sanja's going to talk to you more about the history of Unity. and not just specific to Charles and Myrtle, but to the movement in general. So she'll be speaking with you about that next week. Was it helpful for you to get a reminder email? If so, okay, then I'll ask Sandra to do that too then. Great. Well, it was wonderful getting to spend some time with each of you. And membership Sunday is October 8th. So Sandra will ask you at the end of her class whether or not you want to actually be a member. You don't need to do anything specifically. It's not like we give you a test so you can regurgitate everything we've shared with you. Usually they'll ask you for a photo because we acknowledge all of our new members on Membership Sunday, which is October 8th, and then we'll put it on the website as new members. So if you don't have any other questions, then I'm going to say a closing prayer. Well, I'm just going to ask you once again to settle into where you're at. Drop your attention to your heart space, your chest area, and begin to notice your inhale and exhale. We close in prayer with thanksgiving for the time we have had together today. I'm sending blessings to each of you in this exploration of unity. And blessings to each of you on your decision of what's best for you at this point in your life and whether or not you want to become a member of UBC. And we just say thank you, thank you, thank you, God, for this time that we've had together today. We recognize the time, energy, and effort you put into being here. And we thank you. And so it is. Amen. Okay, my friends, take very good care. And I won't be here next week, but Sandra will be. All righty. Bye-bye.